Simmons, late 50s, production manager. Keith Simmons is a pragmatic, morally conflicted man who has spent his life in the entertainment industry. He is driven by a strong sense of duty to ensure the logistical side of the project runs smoothly, but his inner moral compass begins to unravel as the dark truths of the island emerge. His cynicism and rigid approach to life are challenged as the events take a violent and unexpected turn. Keith is forced to confront his guilt and decide if he's going to remain a passive observer or if he will finally take responsibility for his role in the unfolding nightmare. Background: Keith Simmons is a veteran production manager who has spent decades working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry. With his extensive experience in both large-scale film productions and more niche, indie projects, Keith has seen it all. He's the kind of man who knows how to make things happen, no matter how difficult or chaotic the situation becomes. Keith's resume includes work on action films, documentaries, and commercials, but he's most comfortable in the role of organizing and overseeing the logistics that make these projects come to life. Keith is hired by Monsieur John Simon, a wealthy businessman, to handle all the logistics of the student PSA project, from providing the crew with accommodations and equipment to overseeing the transportation, safety measures, and coordination of filming locations. His job is to ensure everything runs smoothly, except of course when the unforeseen happens. Physical appearance. Keith is a tall man with a slightly hunched posture, a result of years of bending over paperwork and running around managing chaotic sets. His face is lined with marks of experience, particularly around his eyes, which are always squinting either in thought or concentration. His once dark hair has now turned salt and pepper, and he keeps it short and neatly combed. Despite his age, Keith is still in good physical condition, though his energy is not what it used to be. He dresses simply: faded jeans, a basic t-shirt, and a light jacket. He's often seen wearing a set of old, worn boots that speak to his practical nature. Keith doesn't care much for luxury, preferring to blend in with the environment rather than stand out. Personality: efficient and practical. Keith is a man of few words, but a lot of action. His pragmatic nature means he's always thinking ahead, calculating logistics, and solving problems before they arise. He doesn't get flustered easily and approaches each task with a steady, methodical mindset. When it comes to overseeing production, he knows exactly what needs to be done and how to get it done with the least amount of fuss. Keith takes pride in his meticulous planning, which is why he was handpicked by Monsieur John Simon for such a high-profile project. No nonsense and direct. Keith doesn't mince words. He says what he means and expects people to get the job done. If a crew member isn't pulling their weight, he'll make sure they know it. His no-nonsense attitude often comes off as harsh, but he's just a man who's been in the industry long enough to know that time is money, and the sooner people get to work, the better. He's not there to make friends, but to make sure the project runs smoothly, even if that means stepping on a few toes. Quietly cynical. Beneath his professional exterior, Keith has a cynical streak. Over the years, he's seen enough of the Hollywood machine and the cutthroat nature of the entertainment industry to become jaded. While he still takes pride in his work, he has a harder time trusting people, especially the wealthy businessmen and power players who often manipulate the system to suit their needs. He's seen the ugly side of the industry: exploitation, manipulation, and people who don't care about the artistic integrity of a project. This cynicism extends to his view of the island project, which he doesn't fully understand or believe in, considering the motives of the people funding it. Guarded and mysterious. While Keith can be open with the crew when it comes to logistics, he is less willing to share personal details. He doesn't volunteer much information about his own life, preferring to keep things professional. Over the years, he's become emotionally detached from the world around him, and as such, he keeps his emotions and vulnerabilities tightly guarded. His stoic demeanor leaves him as something of an enigma, particularly to those who don't know him well. Occasionally warm. While Keith may seem cold and indifferent, there are moments when his protective side comes through, especially when it comes to the younger members of the crew. He has a soft spot for people who remind him of his younger self, the hard-working, up-and-coming individuals who are trying to make a name for themselves in a competitive industry. He doesn't express this warmth often, but his actions sometimes reveal it. When things go wrong on the island, Kieth's protective nature will be tested, and he will have to decide whether to remain detached or take responsibility for the safety of the group. Flaws and weaknesses. Compromised morality. Kieth's decision to work with Monsieur John Simon, knowing that he's involved in morally questionable business ventures, demonstrates a certain degree of compromised integrity. Kieth is aware that Simon's wealth comes from shady dealings, including the human trafficking network that runs on the island. But Kieth is also a man who values his job and the opportunity to work on a prestigious project. He justifies his involvement by telling himself that he's only there to ensure the logistics go smoothly and that he's not responsible for the bigger picture. This moral ambiguity sets up a complex conflict for Kieth as the events on the island unfold. Stubborn and rigid. While Kieth's methodical approach can be a strength, it also makes him inflexible. He has a set way of doing things and can become easily frustrated when things don't go according to plan. His rigid thinking will be tested when things take a violent and unexpected turn on the island, and his inability to adapt quickly may cause him to make poor decisions. Sample scenes featuring Kieth. 1. Arrival at the island. Scene. The group has just arrived at the island. Kieth stands on the shore, overseeing the unloading of equipment from the boat. His brow is furrowed as he checks his clipboard, looking at the logistics schedule and mentally calculating the time it will take to get everything set up. He's ready to dive into work, but the sight of the lush, unfamiliar terrain causes a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Kieth, to the crew, gesturing to the equipment. "All right, we're on a tight schedule, people. Get the cameras and the lighting gear ready. The faster we move, the sooner we can get this show on the road. Don't screw this up." He watches the students carefully, already scanning them for potential problems. 2. Behind-the-scenes conflict. Scene. Kieth is talking to one of the students, who has asked for an early break. Kieth's patience is thin, and his tone is sharp. "Kieth, listen kid, I get it. You're tired. But this is a job. You signed up for it. So stop whining and get back to work. If you want to be in this business, you need to learn that no one cares about your excuses." He turns and walks away, muttering to himself about how the younger generation lacks the toughness needed to survive in the industry. 3. Moral dilemma. Scene. Kieth is alone in his room, sitting at the desk. He's flipping through paperwork when his phone buzzes. He looks at the message from Monsieur John Simon, a reminder to stay on schedule and a warning not to ask too many questions about the island's arrangements. Kieth's fingers tighten around the phone as he stares at the screen. A conflicted look crosses his face, but he shoves the phone into his pocket and takes a long drag from a cigarette. Kieth, to himself, frustrated. "God, I should have known better than to take a job with him. But there's no turning back now." He takes a final drag and flicks the cigarette out the window, setting his jaw in determination. 4. The island unravels. Scene. As the group begins to experience the horrors of the island, Kieth starts to realize the depth of the situation. His face, usually impassive, is filled with guilt and fear as the stakes rise. He finally comes face to face with the truth about what's happening. Kieth, to Adam, struggling to maintain his composure. I didn't know it would go this far. I was just doing my job. I didn't know." Adam looks at Kieth, anger and disbelief in his eyes, as the group begins to formulate a survival plan. "Adam, you should have known, Kieth. You had to know." Written and directed by Hosam Ibrahim.